Aquarius. So starting, first of all, we are probably aware of these attributes, but it's always good to go back and look at them. The attributes of Aquarius, the English letter is TH. The number is 9. The color is the light blue shades. The note is high G. The occult science, it relates to mental alchemy in that course. Human function is clairaudience. And there you have the natural remedies. It's interesting that myrrh and frankincense are there, and those are sort of always historically been very religious smells. Then we have sky blue sapphire, obsidian, and black pearl as the minerals that are associated. And then when we look at the spiritual, intellectual, and physical expressions of Sagittarius, in the spiritual world, when we think about the highest realm, it represents absolute wisdom. And we know that Zane says that wisdom and love are the two human attributes that actually will survive through the astral plane to the spiritual plane. That those two attributes of wisdom and love, are so detached, so to speak, from the need of a physical reward that they aren't limited like other emotions. So that gives a sort of an indication to the significance of the Aquarian nature in that true absolute wisdom, not the lesser forms of wisdom where we think we're wise, but we're not really. And then in the intellectual world, it represents prudence and guiding the will. So with the thoughts that come into your mind, do you have the wisdom to know those thoughts are something to be acted upon or something to be dismissed? Because we know with the energetic systems that we have, if we allow our thoughts to go down paths that really are not going to end up being fruitful, that's a waste of our directed thinking and a waste of our cerebral energy. Whereas if we've leveraged the wisdom gained through sort of the Aquarian nature, then we don't allow those thoughts to actually have any desire or any other type of energy associated with them to drain the things that we've decided through our will that we want to accomplish. In the physical world, circumspection as a guide to actions. In other words, making sure that you're wise in your choices as it relates to your own physical body, as well as your physical, your physical needs and how you interact with other people. The key characteristics of Aquarian is someone who does have a lot of humanitarian interests, instincts, and they want to make sure that they have a vision of the way things should be in many cases, and that's a vision where people can get along in a much more positive world, because they think about like the whole academic sort of environment, or a whole like Socratic method where everyone's just pursuing intellectual things and not being distracted by all a lot of warring and fighting, but they're free to. So that's Aquarians are really driven by the highest sort of aspects of intellectual and humanitarian instincts. It is the symbol of man and mankind as a whole. It represents our intellect, as we see that with the water and the renewal. The best traits of when they're expressed positively, they're kind. The positive expression of an Aquarius is altruism. So kindness, lack of unselfishness, more very concerned about other people. They're witty, refined. All those intellectual pursuits make them tend to have opinions that have been explored and not just sort of random. So they're very sort of refined and thoughtful in their ideas on things, and they are observers and sort of like to see humanity as a whole and how it operates. So as of the air signs, we have Gemini, who the little baby, right? That I think, and then you get to Libra. You get to Virgo. Libra, and Virgo, and you balance those things between each other. And make sure, and then you get that in Libra, you get that balance, and you take a look at it. And then In Aquarius, you have knowledge. It's at the end of the intellectual process. It's not at the beginning. But when you have that, the problem with that is then you become to think you are too wise, and that leads to an argumentative nature. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. But the ancient symbolism is of the two serpents, signifying the balance of reason and intuition. And we'll talk about those two later. And then two wavy lines again, and it governs the legs, the shins. It's about connecting the physical form to the zodiac meanings. It rules in human function. It rules clairaudience, and that the ability to sort of in the inner world hear in that way, and it to get guidance from both planes. So in terms of that's what it represents. And then the course 9, which represents mental alchemy, which is the occult science part of Aquarius. It is where that is talking about in the alchemical processes where you're mixing two different elements together, or you're adding something in that you have prudence, that you've investigated, and that you do the right amount. Because if you add too much of something, it's going to not allow the process to be guided. So when you think about be completed. So when you think about that in the sense of mental alchemy, are you using the right amount of the rallying force? Are you using the right aspects of the antidote? Because there's always the extreme in mental alchemy when, say, for example, you have a discordant Saturn and you want to leverage Venus. So you want to sort of have some carefree social engagements that are lighthearted and happy and kind and fun to get rid of the sort of restraining, fear-invoking energy of Saturn. But then you can do that if you don't have the wisdom, then you can do that to the excess and just do recreation to the extent that you don't do what you need to do to be successful in your physical life. So that's the part where Aquarius comes in, making sure that as you're applying the mental antidotes, as you're doing the mental rallying forces, as you're doing all the things in mental alchemy, that you're doing it in the right amounts, understanding that the system can take time to change, that if you're heating something up to make a chemical change in it, you can't turn it up to 1,000 degrees and have it happen instantly. Depending upon what you're working with, some things take more time to change. Habits can take more time to change. Bad mental thought patterns can take time to change. So realizing and using that Aquarian nature of knowing that it's going to work, knowing that you've made the right decisions, and then allowing patience and gradual progress to unfold. And that's sort of one of the things I mentioned. And I think in today's society, in the Aquarian age that we're in, I'm not sure which of these two, I'm not sure if the harmonious or the discordant aspect of Aquarius is being manifested. But we see here Zane talks about the Aquarian nature, and that man as a family is ruled by Aquarius. And it says, the best quality of Aquarius is altruism. The worst is argumentation. And in my own personal chart, my best aspect combination is I have Aquarius in my MC. And that's actually my most harmonic, my best sign is Aquarius, but it's also trine Pluto and then the Sun and Mercury, which is conjunct. So I have a lot of energy in Aquarius, but I do notice quickly when that energy manifests discordantly. And the way I really feel that is, when I'm just arguing a lot, where in situations I'm not really trying to listen to the other person. I'm just trying to put my opinion on them. And, that's the negative sign of Aquarius. With Aquarius, it does belong to the knowledge series. The keywords are literally I know. So many times Aquarian will come into the situation with a lot of information and thought about the matter, and then they just want to impose that upon people around them. And, you want to think about where we are as sort of in our political society. We see that manifested directly, right? I don't know if either person, either side to the situation, wants to actually solve the problem. They just want to disagree with the other person. And that would be an indication from a cosmic alchemy perspective, looking at the sort of society as a whole, that we're manifesting a negative Aquarian nature, where a positive Aquarian nature would be listening to another person's point of view, understanding that every person is an individual experiencing reality through their unique consciousness, and the things that they think are based on experiences that you haven't had. And if you can step aside out of your own and listen to the things they're sharing, that's actually what wisdom is. And that's, being wise is taking in information, allowing the experience to happen and observing it, and but not just trying to always tell the reality how it should be. And I think that's really, when I think about Aquarians, and the highest aspect of that, and, in the Church of Light, Aquarius is our most dominant sun sign, and the best quality is expressed is that unselfishness, listening, and really having the other person's best interest at heart, not arguing for the sake of feeling like you know a lot. And that's something that I constantly work on, and hopefully we can all pray for the greater society to do that as well, to listen to each other's and point of view, because that is what the true Aquarian age should be about. One of the things about Aquarius is it does rule both reason and intuition, similar to, Gemini and etc., because the two wavy lines sort of represent that. And it comes through sort of balancing reason and intuition. There's other references to different symbology to those wavy lines, like knowing good and evil. The whole saying that to be truly capable of good, you have to be truly capable of evil. So in other words, they use the example of, like, there are people that act good, but they don't really have the power to do anything bad. And if you gave them power to do something bad, they would do it. So having the power to do something bad, or having the ability and choosing not to, is sort of the symbolism represented in those lines. If you want to take it to a simpler and more personal level than that, it is where you've consciously decided on the character changes, the life changes, whatever you're working on in terms of your personal development in your spiritual path. You've decided what is good. You know what you shouldn't do, but you still do that, or you don't do that. So having been something in the past and lived a certain way, I'm not even talking about morals or ethics. It could be like, I used to never meditate, and now I do. You knew what it was like to not do it, and you're choosing not to. There's a lot more power in that than someone, just done something always and they just do it. There's a lot of power when you make that choice. And then really, I want to spend a moment here talking about intuition. I feel sort of nervous doing that with Doc on the call, who is an expert in it, but I'll give it my best shot. I think it's important when we talk about intuition versus reason, is to first understand that intuition is not an extrasensory sense. There's a quote here from Zane. I can't read the first two words, but it says, because animals commonly apprehend conditions through intuition, and telepathy is a common means of communication among them, we are justified in adopting the classification of the ancients and considering all seven as physical senses. So basically, the telepathy and intuition is not necessarily needing to access information that you don't know, or that you don't necessarily need to enter the inner plane to do these things. These are natural senses that happen in the lower energetic vibration level. You're not approaching, in many cases, upper boundary line, speed of light kind of stuff. That's sort of the way I describe it. But simple way to think about it is, my dog can look at another dog and know what it's thinking without using words. That's telepathy. My dog can intuitively figure something out with that when I know she's not going through a rational process to do that. So those are examples of where we see it in animals. So we think that it is considered part of the seven senses. So it would be different to like intuitively. This way to think of it is reason and intuition are two different pathways that consciousness uses to process information. Reason is like A plus B plus C equals D. Intuition is like A, D. There's no steps in the middle of it. It just comes to you in full awareness of the answer. I recently read a book by Joel Pearson called The Intuition Toolkit, The New Science of Knowing Without Knowing. And it's amazing, as we always see, that science is catching up, always catching up with the mystical truths that we uncover. But in that book, he tells a story of like a world-renowned outdoorsman that was like one of the first four people to climb Mount Everest. And he gets to this gentleman was well known around the world as like he could eat any food and never get upset. Like he had a constitution of iron. But when they were going around the last bend to summit, he said, I'm not going to do it. I feel sick in my stomach. And one guy went with him and two didn't go with him. And those two guys flew off, the wind was bad and it killed them. Now that is, the example that he's getting is that wasn't like some, extrasensory perception. That was the fact that this man was experienced an outdoorsman, and the environmental conditions, he couldn't identify what it was, but his subconscious had enough data to be able to process at levels that his reason couldn't, because everything looked normal to the senses. But on a deeper level, his subconscious was telling him something different. An easy example is like if you walk into a restaurant and you're like, I don't think I want to eat here, right? Immediately, that's your intuition. But it is not necessarily going to the astral plane and extracting information that you don't know. It's from your vast experience throughout your life. It's just that you're not tapping through it through the intellectual conscious A plus B plus C. You're allowing the whole body, not just the brain, but the whole body to process that information based on your collective experience. They do studies now where they can distract one eye. And when you do that, the other eye doesn't really see anything. It sees it, but you have no conscious recollection of it. So if you flash some lights in this eye, then this eye will see a picture of a bird. But then when I ask you, you don't know the bird's there. But then they can do tests then intuitively you'll know the bird's there, even though you don't consciously know it's there. So think about everything in your life that you've experienced that there's no way you can access through your conscious memory right now, but your body and your cells and everything within you has a knowledge of it. That's what you're trying to allow to access to when you're using straight sort of physical intuition. Some of the things to know about it is it's just as accurate as the intellectual and the logical side, but like logic, it does need data. But when you think about why your intuition is so important, is some of the most important questions in life we don't have data on. If you ask me where my keys are, I have a lot of information to figure that out. But the complex things, we run out of RAM to process them, and so the intuition can really help. So when we think about the Aquarian nature of having inner and outer wisdom, this is sort of the ultimate manifestation of the wisdom in the sort of physical body that we're in. That if you can learn that, it really accentuates your ability to use wisdom in the astral world as well. One of the things that he mentioned about this is his little saying he comes up with to when you should use intuition It's, make sure that if you're in a worked up emotional state, it's not a good time to practice it. If you have anxiety, you're excited or whatever, your emotions it makes it really hard to tune into your intuition. When you're practicing, you really want to make sure you do things that you have mastery of. So where you have enough experience in that particular thing that your intuition can be strong because so for example, one of the things is that I've learned to realize is like, I'm very intuitive sort of in business decisions, but that doesn't mean I'm intuitive in relationships situations. But because I maybe not have the vast experience in that, so if I learn to trust my intuition in one area, doesn't necessarily mean it's good in the other area. So that's where I make sure that if I'm not good at something and I don't have a lot of experience at it, it's better for me to sort of think it through to learn it. And then I can begin to trust my intuition. It's like a basketball player. They don't have to think about which way to cut, but when they were learning it, they did. And then it became intuitive. Watch out for impulses and addictions. You see this a lot in like, oh, that's my soulmate, right? Or, oh, I should do this. Your impulses, your strong desires can really mess with your intuitive response because you're interpreting something the way you want it to be and not the way it is. Stay away from things that have low probability when you're training. Like, don't try to intuitively pick whether the ball's going to land on red or black. Use something with a little more simple of an answer, and then make sure that you're in an environment that's familiar and predictable as you're practicing. So for most of us, that would mean to be in a calm emotional state. And then we think about developing your intuition and that Aquarian ability to sort of balance the two. The biggest barriers, believe it or not, is reason. So when you're, say you're intuitively trying to do something, and then immediately you sort of have intuition and your reason jumps on and begins to define and do that and sort of dominates it. And the other one is sort of trying too hard. Intuition is the opposite, not the opposite, but it's sort of the negative to the positive of reason, or reason's a very active, engaged, directive process. Intuition is more of a receptive process. So if you're trying too hard, that most times means that you're engaged in a lot of cerebral activity, and that can really cause a lot of intellectual energy, and that will be dominated by the rational aspect, not allowing for the energy to be diverted to the intuition and the receptive part of it. So that's just an overview of intuition. I really encourage, I know a lot of us have good intuition, but I think from all this data that I've read and everything that I've seen in my own personal experience, it is something that can vastly benefit from, being practiced and feeling comfortable with it. And if you can get it really active in your life, then it frees up a lot of cerebral pressure on your brain from just thinking your way through life. If you can relax that part and sort of be more intuitive in your life, it really allows for a sort of calmness and peacefulness to descend upon you, like that water pouring out of that urn, just relaxing the body because you're not forcing your way to intellectually figure everything out in life. All right, so I would like to take a moment here and trying to get the right view here. Give me 1 second. There you go. All right, I would like to just take a moment here as we've talked through the Aquarius energy, that we just sort of close our eyes, use whatever breathing pattern that you'd like to use, and just get yourself calm. If you want to symbolize the two waves of Aquarius, that certainly would be good. And as you think about that, in the tarot card, the Sage, that symbol of the sage really represents the wanderer, an old figure with a staff and a partially concealed lamp. And what that lamp is symbolizing is, the life journey. Zane teaches us that the soul is made through experience, that each of us possess a unique an individual soul that has, from the time of being a mineral, come into full consciousness by a result of each of our unique experiences in the world. And so the sage is one person wandering the world. The cloak represents the physical world and the material limitations of that, but it's partially removed to show that the deeper understanding that the physical world and material limitations aren't all that there is. The lamp, what we talked about, was that symbolizing that wisdom, which allows discretion and circumspection, always making sure the things and the thoughts that are in the mind are conscious, willful thoughts that are guided by prudence and wisdom. The staff symbolizing strength through overcoming obstacles. So as we conclude our exploration of Aquarius, and we see here in meditation, let us reflect on the sage's path illuminated by Arcanum 9. The wisdom of Aquarius is not found in the clamor of being right, nor in the vanity of thinking one has mastered all knowledge. True wisdom lies in transcending these lower desires and balancing the dual serpents of reason and intuition, where the waters of understanding flow freely from the urn of the higher self. The symbol of Aquarius reminds us of the eternal dance between opposing forces, the wavy lines symbolizing not only water, but the serpents of transformation. To walk the path of the sage is to understand that knowledge is both a blessing and a responsibility. The tree of knowledge of good and evil offered humanity the gift of discernment, but it also demanded humility in the face of the vast cosmos. To be the sage is to hold the lamp of wisdom with discretion, illuminating not for the sake of vanity, but to guide oneself and others through the veils of illusion. It is to temper intellect with kindness, intuition with discernment, and ambition with humanitarian instincts to elevate humanity. In Aquarius, the man of the Zodiac, we are called to rise above our lower natures, to seek harmony, and to recognize that the greatest power is to be found not in knowing everything, but in knowing when to listen, when to love, and when to simply be. May the waters of Aquarius cleanse, inspire, and guide us towards becoming the wise sages of our own lives, dedicated to the betterment of all.